The Ural Mountains, cold, ancient, and indifferent. They rise like frozen waves across the heart of Russia, a white wilderness where storms can swallow sound and erase all trace of the living. In February of 1959, 9 young hikers set out into that emptiness. Students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk. They were skilled, disciplined, and filled with a quiet confidence that comes only from youth and experience. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was 23, already known among his peers for his precision and calm. The group's destination was Mount Otorten, a remote peak nearly 170 kilometers north of their city. In the language of the local Mensi people, the name meant, "Do not go there." The students laughed when they heard it, dismissing the warning as legend. They believed in logic, in maps and compasses and preparation. The mountains were obstacles to be understood, not feared. There were 8 men and 2 women when they began, 10 in all, though one would turn back before the end. They carried skis, tents, cameras, notebooks, and weeks of supplies. They wanted not only the adventure, but the honor of earning their highest grade in winter trekking, a mark of mastery recognized across the Soviet Union. On January 25th, they boarded a train heading north, laughing and singing songs with other passengers. Photographs from that journey show smiles, snowflakes on coats, faces glowing with the excitement of youth. They did not know that the path ahead would lead into mystery, into fear, and finally into death. The expedition that began in laughter would end with a tent ripped open from within and 9 bodies scattered across the snow. The journey north unfolded in stages, from train to truck, from truck to skis. The group moved steadily toward the frozen ridges of the Ural Range. Their packs were heavy, but spirits remained high. In their journals later found among the ruins, they described the cold, the laughter, the teasing between friends. They were disciplined, yet human, making jokes, sharing bread, celebrating small victories against the biting wind. The photographs they took along the way show smiles framed by frost. There is Igor Dyatlov, adjusting his compass. Zina Kolmogorova, her cheeks red with cold, but smiling for the camera. Rustam Slobodin, joking with his skis. The world they left behind was order and warmth. The world ahead was endless white. At the last inhabited village, Vizai, they stayed one night, resting before the climb. The locals wished them luck, though some warned of worsening weather. From that point on, there would be no more roads, no more houses, only mountains. Their route would lead them toward a desolate pass between 2 peaks, one later named in their memory. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, fell ill and turned back. He would live because of it. The others continued on skis, vanishing into the wilderness. Their last notes describe the blinding snow, the shrieking wind, and the sense of being cut off from the world. None of them could have imagined that only days later, rescuers would find their tent torn apart, and their story turned into legend. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, no one panicked at first. Delays were common in winter expeditions, and Dyatlov's team was known for caution. But as the days stretched on and no message arrived, concern deepened into fear. Families waited for news that never came. Letters and telegrams went unanswered. On February 20th, search teams were finally dispatched into the mountains. Rescuers included students, teachers, and soldiers. Helicopters swept the ridges, while ski patrols combed the valleys. The weather was brutal. Temperatures below -20, wind like a living thing that clawed at faces. For 9 days they found nothing but snow and silence. Then, on February 26th, a team spotted something strange on the slope of Kolet Syachol, the Mountain of the Dead, as the Mansi called it. A small patch of orange canvas lay half buried in the snow, the tent of Igor Dyatlov and his group. At first it appeared intact, but when rescuers approached, they saw the fabric shredded, the cuts made from inside. The hikers had not escaped an attack. They had torn their way out themselves. Inside were sleeping bags, boots, coats, food, maps, even money and identification. Everything needed to survive was still there, except the people. Bare footprints led away from the camp, pressing deep into the snow, heading toward the tree line below. Some were made by bare feet, others in socks, some by a single shoe. All vanished into the forest shadow. The rescuers followed the footprints into the trees. The trail wound down the slope for nearly half a kilometer before disappearing beneath fresh snow. Then, among the trunks, they found the first sign of the missing group, a blackened patch of earth, the remains of a small fire. Nearby stood a cedar tree, its lower branches snapped and stripped bare. Beneath it lay 2 bodies. They were barefoot, dressed only in underwear and torn shirts. The snow around them was stained with ash and frozen blood. Their names were Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko. Both had burns on their hands, as though they had tried to climb into the flames for warmth. The cedar above them was scarred with broken branches high up, suggesting that someone had tried to climb it, perhaps to see the tent in the distance, or to escape something unseen. The rescuers built another fire, their breath white in the air, and radioed the discovery back to camp. But even as they worked, unease settled in. Why had the hikers fled without clothes, without boots, without coats? The temperature was far below freezing. To run barefoot into such a night meant panic, or something worse. As darkness fell again, they pressed on, spreading out across the snow. More shapes emerged beneath the drifts, more of the lost. And with each discovery, the questions grew heavier. 3 more bodies were found between the cedar tree and the tent, as though the hikers had been trying to crawl back towards safety. Igor Dyatlov lay face up, one hand clutching a branch. Zina Kolmogorova and Rostam Slobodin were nearby, half buried by snow. Their poses told a story of desperate effort, frozen mid-stride. Dyatlov wore only a jacket and socks. Zina had 1 boot on, 1 off. Rustam's skull showed a small fracture, but no other wounds that could explain his death. It seemed as though all 3 had simply collapsed and frozen where they fell. Between the tent and the forest, 5 bodies now accounted for, but 4 remained missing. The search paused for several days as blizzards swept through. When it resumed, the remaining 4 would not be found until months later, buried deep beneath the snow in a ravine. But even before that discovery, investigators knew the case was far from ordinary. Something had driven 9 experienced hikers from their tent in the middle of the night into temperatures that would kill within minutes. There were no signs of an avalanche, no tracks of animals, no evidence of another group nearby, only silence and the endless white. When the last 4 bodies were finally uncovered in May, the snowmelt revealed a horror that deepened the mystery. They were found nearly 75 meters farther into the ravine, partially buried by ice. Unlike the others, these hikers showed signs of violent trauma. One had a fractured skull, 2 had multiple broken ribs, and one woman, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her eyes and part of her tongue. At first, investigators assumed the damage was caused by snow pressure or by animals after death, but the pattern of injuries puzzled the medical examiners. The force required to break ribs and crush a skull was immense, more like a car accident than a fall. Yet there were no external wounds, no torn flesh, no bruising where the bones had shattered. Clothing recovered from the bodies added another layer of confusion. Some garments were strangely radioactive. Others had been taken from the dead near the cedar tree, as if the survivors had tried to dress themselves using what they could find in the dark. By the time the last of the 9 were laid to rest, fear had taken hold. Even the search team spoke in hushed tones. What could drive people from shelter in the dead of night, half-dressed and terrified, into the freezing dark, only to die in such impossible ways? The investigation began almost immediately, led by Soviet authorities who were both fascinated and unnerved. They interviewed rescuers, examined photographs, and studied the site. The tent was still pitched on an open slope. No signs of avalanche, no heavy snow above it. The hikers had cut their way out, leaving the entrance zipped shut behind them. Inside, the stove was neatly packed, their food arranged as if dinner had just ended. A half-eaten meal still sat on a plate, their boots lined up along one wall, their axes and gear undisturbed. The pattern made no sense. Whatever had driven them out had done so instantly, without reason or warning. Investigators found 9 sets of footprints, leading away in an orderly line, not a chaotic scatter. It was as if they had calmly walked, not run, into the storm. Yet within minutes of leaving the tent, they would have faced -30 degrees, a death sentence without proper clothing. The search team's radio reports became increasingly grim. They spoke of eerie quiet, of the strange arrangement of the bodies, and of something about the camp that felt wrong. Rumors spread through nearby towns. Some said the hikers had been attacked. Others whispered of secret weapons, or something that came from the sky. In the weeks that followed, the medical reports deepened the mystery. Of the 9, 6 had died of hypothermia, frozen in the snow, their faces peaceful, as if sleep had simply taken them. The other 3 bore injuries that defied explanation: broken ribs, crushed skulls, internal bleeding with no external wounds. It was as though the force had acted from within. One of the women, Lyudmila Dubinina, had her tongue missing. The coroner could not determine when or how it had been removed. He simply noted that the wound showed clean edges. Another hiker, Thibaut Brignol, had his skull caved in, though his skin remained unbroken. For every question answered, 2 more arose. Tests for toxins, for alcohol, for foul play all came back negative. The group had been healthy, sober, disciplined. The area showed no signs of a fight or outside presence. Even their diaries, filled with jokes and plans, offered no clue. One entry ended cheerfully, mentioning their camp setup. The next day, they would all be dead. As word spread, curiosity turned to fear. The Ural wilderness seemed cursed now, a place where logic failed, and people vanished without cause. The local Mansi people, whose land the hikers had crossed, were questioned. Some Soviet officials suspected a tribal attack, perhaps in anger at trespassers. But there were no tracks except those of the hikers themselves. The Mansi were hunters. They would have left signs. And besides, they revered those mountains. They would never have desecrated them. The theory collapsed quickly. Then came the radiation tests. Several items of clothing, particularly those taken from the bodies in the ravine, registered higher than normal radiation levels. It was not enough to kill, but enough to disturb. Investigators could not explain it. The hikers had no connection to nuclear work, no reason to carry radioactive material, yet the readings were real. Adding to the unease were witness reports from nearby villages. Around the night of the tragedy, several people claimed to have seen glowing orange spheres moving across the sky. Some described them as fireballs, others as silent lights drifting above the mountains. Officially, the sightings were dismissed as rockets or weather phenomena, but they fueled the growing sense that something beyond understanding had occurred on that frozen slope. By March of 1959, the official investigation was already running into walls. Theories came and went like the blizzards that swept across the pass. Avalanche, exposure, a tragic chain of panic. But none of these ideas could explain the most crucial facts. The slope where they camped was too shallow for a true avalanche. The tent still stood half buried but upright, and the footprints leaving it showed calm, deliberate movement, not the chaos of fleeing from a collapsing wall of snow. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, grew frustrated. He was a practical man, trained in logic and procedure, but the evidence defied him. The combination of strange injuries, radiation, missing eyes and tongue, and the total absence of outside interference was maddening. He wrote that it was like an unknown compelling force had driven the hikers to their deaths. That phrase would echo for decades. Newspapers caught wind of the story, though coverage was limited by censorship. The Soviet Union in 1959 did not welcome mysteries. The narrative of control, of order, left little room for unexplained deaths on a mountain. And so quietly, the case began to sink beneath official silence. Still, the rumors refused to die. Among the rescuers and locals, other explanations took hold. Some spoke of infrasound, a powerful wind-created vibration that can cause nausea, dread, and panic. According to this theory, a storm on the mountain might have generated low-frequency waves that disoriented the hikers, forcing them to flee their tent in terror. But the evidence did not fully match. The footprints showed order, not confusion. Their camp had been tidy, and why had some died violently while others simply froze? Others whispered of secret military tests. The Cold War was in full shadow, and the Ural Mountains were no stranger to classified experiments. Could the hikers have witnessed something forbidden? A new type of weapon? A rocket? Or even a chemical test? The orange lights seen in the sky gave weight to this idea. Some said the bright orbs were parachute mines being tested in secret. The blast shockwaves could have caused the internal injuries. It fit, but only partly. There were no burn marks, no craters, no debris. For every theory, another contradiction appeared. It was as if the mountain itself was guarding the truth. By spring, the investigation concluded abruptly. The final report was short, vague, and unsatisfying. It listed the cause of death as an unknown compelling force, offering no further detail. The files were sealed, the photographs locked away, and the pass where it happened was marked on maps with a new name, Dyatlov Pass, in memory of the group's leader. Families of the victims were left with questions that no one dared to answer. Some were told quietly to stop asking. The Soviet Union of the 1950s had little patience for mysteries. It was easier to let silence stand than to admit confusion. But silence does not erase curiosity. Over the years, whispers of the case spread among mountaineers, students, and those drawn to the unexplained. The Dyatlov Pass incident became a legend, part cautionary tale, part conspiracy, part ghost story. People spoke of it in hushed voices, as though the mountain itself could still hear. And for the few who returned to the site in later years, the feeling never changed. The snow still swallowed sound, the wind still howled through the ridges, and every footprint felt like it might be watched. Years passed. The Soviet Union changed, but the Dyatlov Pass mystery did not fade. In universities, mountaineers debated it. In remote villages, people still whispered about the night the 9 died. When the files were partially declassified decades later, they revealed more confusion than clarity. Blurred photos, incomplete reports, missing evidence. Theories multiplied. Some spoke of a failed rocket test, others of secret radiation experiments, or even a collision with something from space. Witnesses came forward claiming to have seen bright spheres crossing the sky that week, glowing orange against the snow clouds. Theories of UFOs found fertile ground, especially after the Cold War ended and new stories of secrecy filled the air. Others searched for simpler truths. Perhaps it was panic caused by sound, the howling wind producing low-frequency vibrations that triggered disorientation. Perhaps it was snow load collapse, forcing them to cut their way out before the tent suffocated them. But neither idea truly fit. The evidence seemed designed to resist explanation. Over time, the Dyatlov Pass became a symbol of mystery itself, not only for what happened there, but for how deeply humans crave answers that will never come. In the 1970s and 80s, foreign writers discovered the story and brought it to the wider world. Western journalists, no longer bound by Soviet censorship, published translations of survivor interviews and the recovered diaries. Readers were struck by how ordinary the hikers' words were, how alive they seemed only days before they died. Notes about laughter, cooking, and cold feet. Simple human things that made the tragedy unbearable. Some amateur researchers returned to the site, retracing the path from Vizhai to the pass. They measured slopes, studied wind direction, photographed the mountain's scars. They found nothing conclusive, but all agreed on one thing. There was something unnatural about the place. The stillness felt heavy, the air charged, as if the mountain remembered. For the families, each new theory reopened old wounds. The mystery became a kind of wound for the nation itself, a riddle that refused healing. And through it all, the phrase remained, an unknown compelling force. After the fall of the Soviet Union, journalists and independent researchers gained greater access to the archives. They discovered inconsistencies, missing pages, photos numbered out of order, statements crossed out. Some investigators quietly admitted that pressure had come from above to close the case quickly. It was not unusual for the era, but it added a layer of intrigue that would never go away. In the 1990s, television documentaries brought the case to new audiences. Each one told the story slightly differently. Some focused on the science, others leaned toward the supernatural. Theories now ranged from secret weapons to alien contact, from government cover-ups to natural disasters. The truth seemed lost somewhere between them all. And yet, the details never stopped haunting people. The image of that torn tent, the bare footprints leading into the forest, the bodies arranged as if in some unknown order. These things stayed in the public imagination, refusing to be forgotten. The Dyatlov Pass was no longer just a place. It had become a question. In the early 2000s, the case found new life through the internet. Digital forums, blogs, and early documentaries carried the mystery across the world. Researchers from different countries began piecing together fragments of old reports, photographs, and testimonies that had never before been seen outside Russia. Suddenly, the story of 9 vanished hikers became an international obsession. Some writers treated it as folklore, others approached it as forensic science. Specialists in avalanche dynamics, meteorology, and human behavior all took their turn. But the more data was gathered, the stranger it seemed. The camp location was still wrong for a traditional avalanche. The body's injuries were still inconsistent with a fall or a fight. And no one could explain why a group of disciplined hikers would run half-dressed into a deadly blizzard. By now, the story had grown beyond its facts. It had become a mirror where people projected their fears of nature, of authority, of the unknown. In every theory, there was something personal, a reflection of what each investigator most dreaded. That may be why the case refused to die. Then, in 2019, 60 years after the tragedy, the Russian government reopened the case. Officials promised a full scientific review using modern technology. Investigators visited the pass, flew drones, and recreated the slope with satellite mapping. Their conclusion was cautious. A small slab avalanche triggered by unusual snow and wind conditions had collapsed the tent. The hikers, fearing burial, had fled, only to become lost in darkness and cold. It sounded plausible. The angle of the slope, the snow buildup, and the lack of immediate signs all fit the model. For a moment, it seemed the mystery had at last been solved. But then the experts outside the investigation pointed out the familiar inconsistencies. The snow layer was too thin for such a collapse. The footprints were orderly, not desperate. And the injuries, still too violent for mere compression. The Dyatlov Pass incident, once again, slipped beyond certainty. One of the most striking new interpretations came from an unexpected source: animation. In 2021, researchers at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology used computer modeling inspired by the snow physics in the Disney film Frozen. Their work demonstrated how a small, delayed slab of snow could indeed strike with enough force to cause internal injuries while leaving little external damage. It was elegant, scientific, and believable, almost. Yet even this theory left gaps. Why had the hikers chosen such a dangerous campsite on a bare slope? Why had they fled in an orderly line, leaving supplies behind? And how could one explanation account for radiation, missing eyes, missing tongue, and glowing spheres in the sky? The avalanche theory explained part of the truth, but not all of it. Perhaps no single cause ever will. The mountain keeps its secrets well. For those who stand at the pass today, the silence feels deeper than ever. a reminder that not all mysteries can be tamed by science. For the families, the reopening of the case brought little comfort. Decades had passed, but the wounds never closed. Many of the parents had died without answers, and those who remained were too tired for new theories. They only wanted truth, something solid to place between memory and pain. Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor who had turned back before the tragedy, lived with that question for the rest of his life. He often said he wished he had died with his friends, that perhaps then the guilt would have been lighter. When asked what he believed had happened, he could only shake his head. "Something that we will never understand," he once said quietly. For the searchers, too, the memory lingered. Some never returned to the mountains again. Others confessed to dreams of orange light, of voices in the wind. It was as though the mountain itself had left a mark on everyone who came near it. And over time, the Dyatlov Pass became more than a place of tragedy. It became a shrine to curiosity and fear, a place where logic ends and myth begins. The pass was officially renamed in honor of Igor Dyatlov, the leader whose calm determination had once inspired his friends. Now it was a memorial carved in ice and wind. Each year, small groups of hikers retrace the path, laying flowers in the snow. They come not for answers, but to feel the silence for themselves. The wind that moves across that slope is strange. It whistles, moans, and sometimes falls utterly still, as if the mountain itself is listening. Travelers speak of a pressure in the air, a sense that they are being watched. Some describe faint lights dancing on the horizon at night, just as witnesses once reported in 1959. The legend has become part of Russian folklore, told in classrooms, whispered at campfires, debated by scientists and skeptics alike. The Dyatlov Pass incident stands as a reminder that not every mystery will be solved, and perhaps not every mystery should be. Even today, the snow hides more than it reveals. 60 years have passed, yet the case continues to call to new generations. Books, films, and documentaries retell the story, each claiming to reveal the final truth. But each ends the same way, with uncertainty. The Dyatlov Pass incident has become the perfect riddle. Every explanation seems reasonable until you look closer. Then it falls apart like snow beneath the wind. Skeptics say it was only nature, the mountain reminding humanity of its indifference. Believers whisper of cover-ups, weapons tests, or something not of this world. In the end, both sides share the same fascination. They are drawn not to the answer, but to the question itself. What happened on that frozen slope is not just a puzzle, it is a mirror. In it we see our need to explain the inexplicable, to bring order to chaos, to make sense of the dark. But some truths remain buried. As time moved forward, the Dyatlov Pass incident left the realm of tragedy and entered the realm of legend. It became a story told not just by scientists, but by filmmakers, authors, and dreamers. Every generation reshaped it. The hikers became symbols of curiosity and courage, explorers reaching too far into the unknown. The mountain, once nameless and cold, became a stage where fear itself took form. In Russia, the story holds a special place. It is not told with mockery or exaggeration, but with a deep respect. These were not fools or thrill seekers. They were disciplined, intelligent young people, trained to face hardship. Their loss reminds listeners that nature, for all our maps and logic, still holds dominion over us. Abroad, the case became something else, a puzzle to solve, a ghost story dressed in science. It joined the ranks of mysteries like the Bermuda Triangle, the Tunguska explosion, and the lost colony of Roanoke. Wherever curiosity gathers, the Dyatlov Pass is never far behind. And still, no one agrees on what truly happened there. Modern expeditions to the pass continue, though now the route is mapped and the danger well known. Even so, hikers describe an unease that settles over the slopes. Some speak of hearing voices carried on the wind. Others report flashes of light at night, strange echoes from the valley, the sense that they are being watched from somewhere above. Skeptics dismiss these tales as imagination, the mind playing tricks in isolation. But for those who spend nights there, surrounded by endless snow and silence, imagination feels very real. The mountain has a way of reminding you that you are small and that it is vast. Each year, new visitors leave offerings near the memorial stone: flowers, candles, photographs. Some leave notes asking for protection. Others whisper their own theories to the wind, as though the dead might finally answer. None ever do. Only the snow listens. The Dyatlov Pass story continues to fascinate because it sits perfectly between the known and the unknown. Science reaches for logic. Faith reaches for meaning. And in between lies the mystery. It is the same tension that has followed humanity since the beginning, the need to explain what frightens us. Forensic scientists rebuild the final hours again and again, placing the hikers in their tent, then outside it, then scattered beneath the trees. Each reconstruction feels so close to truth, and yet something always escapes. Perhaps it is because the truth itself was buried that night, erased by wind and time. When the wind rises across the pass, it sounds like voices calling from far away. Perhaps it is only the air moving through stone and snow, or perhaps somewhere out there, the 9 who vanished are still trying to be heard. Whatever the answer, the Dyatlov Pass remains what it has always been, a place where reason ends and wonder begins. The Dyatlov Pass is no longer just a mystery. It has become a mirror reflecting the fragile balance between knowledge and the unknown. Each new generation rediscovers the story and sees something different: the recklessness of youth, the cruelty of nature, or the limits of science. In truth, perhaps it is all of these. The hikers' journals reveal not fear, but joy. They wrote about snowball fights, shared jokes, songs sung into the wind. Their handwriting is steady, confident. They trusted the world to make sense. And that may be what haunts us most, that in their final hours, reason itself failed them. The mountain gave no warning, no roar of an avalanche, no enemy in the dark, only the cold, the wind, and the sudden, incomprehensible decision to flee. Whatever compelled them was powerful enough to override every instinct for survival, and yet invisible. It is that invisibility, that perfect absence of cause, that makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so deeply unsettling. Over the years, countless investigators have tried to reconstruct the final moments. Some believe they can see the sequence clearly, the snow shifting, the fear rising, the group breaking apart, the desperate struggle in the forest. But others look at the same evidence and see only chaos. The footprints fade, the snow erases. Every clue is temporary, every truth uncertain. Perhaps that is the real lesson of Dyatlov Pass, that some mysteries do not exist to be solved, but to remind us of what we do not control. Nature, chance, and time are greater than us all. Standing there today with the wind clawing at the rocks and the sky wide and cold, it is easy to understand how small we are. The pass feels eternal. The events of 1959 feel recent. The distance between the living and the dead seems only a breath. The snow still falls. The mountain still waits. Even now, the Dyatlov Pass remains a place of pilgrimage for the curious. Travelers come from every corner of the world, drawn not by horror, but by wonder. They ski the same trail, camp on the same slope, and gaze at the same sky that once looked down upon the Nine. Some say the silence there is unlike any other, a silence that feels aware. At the memorial stone near the tree line, the names are etched deep into granite. Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Georgy Krivonishenko, Lyudmila Dubinina, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Alexander Kolovatov, Semyon Zolotaryov. Their faces smile from photographs, forever young, forever frozen in that winter of 1959. Visitors often say that standing there changes something inside them. The mystery no longer feels distant or abstract. It feels human, a reminder that courage and fear often walk the same path. And the mountain still whispers their names. The Dyatlov Pass stands today as both memorial and mystery. There are plaques and markers, but they do little to explain what truly happened. Tour guides recite the known facts, dates, distances, names, but the deeper story is told in silence. It hangs in the air, woven into every gust of wind, every snowflake that drifts across the slope. Visitors often describe an overwhelming stillness there. Even when the wind roars, it seems to come from far away, as if the mountain is holding its breath. Some say the air feels charged, almost electric. Others feel nothing at all, only emptiness, the weight of a question that has lingered too long. The scientists who continue to study the case insist that every mystery has an answer. The hikers died from cold, or avalanche, or a chain of tragic errors. Yet those explanations, however logical, never seem to touch the heart of it. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains suspended between reason and the impossible, between proof and faith. And perhaps that is why it endures, because it forces us to face how little we truly know. For the people of Russia, the story is not simply a riddle. It is a reminder of courage, youth, and the unpredictable power of nature. The 9 who died were not reckless. They were disciplined and determined. They set out to test their limits, and in doing so, stepped into legend. Their story is told to new hikers, not as a warning, but as an acknowledgement of the thin line that separates adventure from tragedy. In the decades since, the pass has drawn scientists, skeptics, and believers alike. Each comes searching for something: evidence, meaning, closure. But what they find instead is perspective. Beneath the endless white sky, surrounded by wind and silence, every visitor realizes the same truth: that human certainty is fragile and nature is vast, beyond comprehension. Somewhere out there, beneath meters of snow and time, the answers may still rest, frozen, untouched, waiting for someone who will never come. Standing at Dyatlov Pass today, it is easy to imagine the scene. The orange tent half buried in snow, the footprints fading into the forest, the silent witnesses of wind and ice. The story belongs to history now, yet it feels alive, whispered each winter when the cold returns. There are mysteries we solve, and there are mysteries that remain to remind us of our limits. The Dyatlov Pass incident is one of the latter. No matter how many explanations are offered, something deeper always escapes, something that belongs only to that mountain and to the 9 who vanished there. And so when the snow falls again over the Ural Mountains, when the wind cries through the ridges and the stars burn cold above, some say you can still hear faint echoes, voices, laughter, the sound of footsteps across the ice. I leave you with this thought. Could it be that whatever happened on that frozen slope might one day happen again? The wind over Dyatlov Pass still whispers their names. If you want to hear more voices from the past, follow and subscribe to Sleepy Mysteries, where every tale is true and every answer hides another question, and of course read to you by myself, Regina Sage Monroe.